Hey, so, do you have any idea what we could do for the Christmas special this year?
Well, we did Space Wolves last year, so maybe we could do something Sanguinalia related?
Nah, I mean, we did Blood Angels pretty recently.
It's an elf on a shelf, innit?
That was really bad, even for us. Greetings, Exodite Dragon Knights, and welcome to Codex Compliant.
In this very festive episode, we're looking at 1994's Codex Eldar. Oh, can't forget him. Why?
The Eldar are an ancient and sophisticated race, immersed in a continuous battle for survival in a galaxy overrun by barbaric usurpers.
This first version of Codex Eldar was released during 40k's second edition and was written by Rick Priestley. Like the other second edition codices, this one has incredibly colourful cover art, this time by Jeff Taylor. One of the really fun little details in this one is that in the background you can see these flyers that look nothing like any of the Eldar vehicles we have today and aren't anywhere else in the Codex. Finding out what they were took literally minutes of Google searching. Minutes, I tell you! My job is hard, damn it. Turns out that these are the old epic wave serpents, and I kinda dig the design. They're like an elven clothes iron. There was also a 40k scale version produced in the 90s by one of the precursors to Forge World. Forge World.
Yeah, there used to be a bunch of companies that created resin models, all based in California and officially licensed by GW. One of them was called Forge World, but is, as far as we can tell, totally unrelated to the modern Forge World. Also, the companies often produce the same models just to add to the confusion. But we're getting sidetracked. What we really should be doing is thanking Peter Johnson, who apparently owned this copy long before we did. Pete, we hope you're doing well, wherever you may be.
So I think the best way to begin is to read the very first paragraph from this book because, yeah, it's a pretty strong one. Lost in the vastness of space, the craft worlds float in utter isolation, like scattered jewels upon a pall of velvet. No starshine illuminates their sleek towers. Distant from the warmth of sun or planet, their domes stare into the darkness of empty space. Inner lights glisten like phosphorus through semi-transparent surfaces. Within live the few survivors of planets abandoned aeons ago amidst terrifying destruction. These are the Eldar, a race that is all but extinct, the last remnants of a people whose mere dreams once overturned worlds and quenched suns. Yeah, I suppose that's alright if you're into things that are, good. Unsurprisingly, that opening paragraph is still used in the current codex since, yeah, it's going to be pretty hard to improve upon that. Plus, for us, finding bits of text that have been around for decades is always kind of fun.
The Craftworld Eldar are mostly the same in here as in the present day, a dwindling race of elves whose souls are being eaten by a randy space god. It's just had parts refined or expanded upon as time went on. Although, sometimes things in here are more elaborate in here than in the current codex. For example, there's a lot more info on the Exarchs, like when they take on their fancy armour, they also take on the name associated with it, usually the name of the first Exarch to wear it. I guess I just have to hope that the first person who wore that suit didn't have a ridiculously embarrassing name. It also goes into a lot more detail on the Exodites, for reasons that shall become apparent in a moment. For those that may not be familiar, if Craftworld Eldar are space elves, then the Exodites are space wood elves. They are described as vigorous and wild, which sounds very tiring to be around, to be honest. This book goes into how their societies actually function, like how they're made up of smaller tribes under a local ruling tribe, which is under a king, and their royal tribe that rules the planet. It's rare for the tribes to fight with each other, but little skirmishes often break out between young knights, since they are a robust, self-confident, and prideful people. Again, they sound very tiring.
The biggest difference in the lore here is simply that this is before the Dark Eldar existed, so obviously any reference to them is absent. This does, however, mean that the existence of Chaos Eldar is mentioned, something we don't have now since the Drukhari kind of filled that niche without actually being Chaos. Chaos Eldar are described as being particularly bad even for the followers of Chaos, given that Slaanesh is the manifestation of the most wild and unrestrained form of the Eldar mind. Speaking of Chaos, the short stories in here are all about various Eldari fighting the forces of Chaos. One even mentions Beastmen, which is one of those things we've not talked about nearly enough in this series. Because, Beastmen are just kind of neat.
Moving on from the lore, something of note about this book is that as well as Craftworld Eldar, this codex has rules for every kind of Eldar. Sort of. Ynnari and Drukhari didn't exist yet, but in here you have regular Eldar, Harlequins, Exodites, and Eldar pirates, the latter of which you could call the precursors to the Dark Eldar, I suppose. So this means that as well as getting units you'd expect like Farseers, Warp Spiders, and Warwalkers, there are also Exodite Lords, Pirate Captains, which are making a very specific and strange image come into my head, Eldar Pirate Squads, and the Megadon riding Exodite Dragon Knights. Otherwise known as Space Elves riding Space Dinosaurs, or otherwise known as the coolest goddamn thing we don't have in modern 40k. Bring them back, James Workshop, you inveterate coward!
And then of course you have Harlequins, which are separated into their own section, since just like the Sisters of Battle Codex from last time, this codex has a slightly different way of structuring what makes up your army. In here, up to 50% of your Eldar force can be Harlequins, unless of course you just wanted to use all Harlequins, in which case you can have 100%. Just no in-betweens. The selection of terrifying spindly murder clowns are Great Harlequins, which is just something you can do with stratagems now, Death Jesters, Solitaires, Shadow Seers, and of course, your regular Harlequin squads. There's also some units that were later renamed and retooled, like Eldar Scouts, which are now Eldar Rangers, and the weapons platforms, some of which just used generic names back then but were later changed to be Eldar specific. For example, the las cannons in here would later become Bright Lancers. There's also Dreadnoughts, which are now Wraithlords, although they weren't quite as able to be a walking pile of guns as they are now.
Okay, that is not a legal build, but I will allow it because it is ridiculous.
As for special characters, we have, and dear God, I've never said most of these out loud, so please wish me luck, Asherman, Morgan Ra, Karandras, Fugan, Baharoth, Jane Zar, and Eldrad. All of which, unusually for 2nd edition special characters, are still playable in the current codex. Hell, most of them still use the same models. Which does mean that you get to see the comparison between the studio painted versions then and now, seeing how the painting styles have evolved over the years.
And while we're looking at the models, we might as well check out the rest of the colour section. The only major difference in the Craftworld colour schemes, once you adjust for the increased vibrancy of 2nd edition of course, is that Craftworld Uthwi have yellow helmets rather than the bone colour they have now. Apart from the Warlocks, who seem to be trying to wear every colour at once, and you know what, good for them. Sure, most of the models have been replaced by now, but it's shocking to see how many of the models in here are still a part of the Eldar model line. We're in Ragnar Blackmane, the models that will not die territory here, people. However, there are a lot of fun out of production models in here too, in particular the old jet bikes that have a bit more of an American chopper feeling to them. These Harlequins, who are definitely a thing, and this Eldar Scout who gives off a powerful and menacing waiting at the bus stop in the rain energy. Although special mention has to go to the old Warwalker model that appears to be daring its enemies to kick the pilot right in his spirit stones.
But what can this stuff actually do on the tabletop, we hear you cry into the crushing void? Well, as you would expect, some stuff is a lot more complicated than it is now, like D-cannons needing all this to explain how they work. You see, they use the same tech as warp travel and create localized spatial distortions that is inaccurate even in expert hands. To represent this, you actually have to roll the scatter dice twice, and as someone who loved the old scatter dice, I am very much in favour of this. They also didn't wound normally. On a roll of 1 to 4, the target is simply destroyed, but on a 5 or 6, they are just moved around by the blast. Sometimes by a small amount, sometimes by a large amount, sometimes into the air, taking damage as they fall, and sometimes into the floor, causing an explosion as they suddenly find themselves sharing molecules with the ground. Although the funniest one is probably where they just get placed upside down, which in the case of things like tanks means they just get stuck there for the rest of the game. Of course nowadays D-cannons are just summarised with this, which is a little simpler than a page and a half of rules, I suppose. Oh, and apparently the D in D-cannon means distort, which I somehow had never noticed before, and I literally have an Eldar army so I've got no excuse. Wraithguard were also more complicated, with them not having a conventional toughness value and working like a vehicle in that and only that perspective. It was also possible that when you penetrate their armour, they explode as the Spirit Stone releases its energy, instantly killing models within 2 inches on a roll of 6. Something my Spirit Host-based Eldar force is very happy that they don't do anymore.
In the not actually more complicated but just interesting category, Rangers then Scouts could get jet bikes, lasgun carrying Guardians that could swap out lasguns for dual-wielded las pistols, and avatars being unable to be hurt by heat-based weapons, so things like melters and plasma guns would do nothing. There's also the matter of Exa Warrior Powers. These are buffs you can buy for your Exarchs to represent their centuries of experience in battle. Also, for the non-Eldar players watching, Exarchs are now the equivalent of a squad leader for aspect warriors, but in 2nd they were standalone characters. These bonuses were varied, from Fast Shot, allowing them to shoot twice per turn, to Mighty Strike, where you can trade multiple melee attacks for a single, more powerful one, to Disarm, where you can permanently destroy an opponent's weapon in hand-to-hand combat. Regular Exarchs could pick 2 of these powers, and the Phoenix Lords, that's all the special characters from earlier minus Eldrad, all got 3 specific ones. For example, Corandris got Tough, Sustain Attack, and Stealth.
Lastly, something you'll have probably noticed with those beautiful, beautiful eyes of yours, is that there is some lovely artwork going on in this book. There's a lot of very stylised images, many by John Blanche, that give a very different take on the Eldar. Like this flyer that looks to be a curious mixture of a Viper jet bike and Captain Nemo's submarine, these very unusual Harlequins, or this mildly terrifying howling banshee. Although one that stands out particularly to me is this image of an Exarch, possibly since the helmet bears a passing resemblance to the one we'd later see on Alfarius' Forge World model. The one full-page image in this codex is great too, featuring an avatar of Cain standing over the burnt-out husk of a marine. It's by Mark Gibbons, pictured here being birthed by a tree, whose work you'll have seen a lot in this series since he did a lot of stuff for GW around this era. He also shares his name with a watercolour artist who paints landscapes, making Google confuse the two and no doubt annoying watercolour Mark that the internet thinks that he draws burly spacemen with outrageously large shoulder pads.
So the 2nd edition Codex Eldar is a pretty good repository for their pre-Drukhari Eldar lore, and the fact it has Exodite Dragon Knights means it's automatically the best Eldar Codex. That's it. That's the conclusion. Look, when another Codex lets you ride dinosaurs, we'll talk, okay? I don't make the rules. Thank you very much for watching, and happy holidays! We hope that the Red Gobbo brings you all the little plastic friends your heart desires.
So we're aware that this episode is not exactly as festively themed as you might hope, so what we're going to do is we are going to try this all about that based lip balm that's supposed to taste like Christmas dinner. Yeah. What does it smell like?
It smells like gravy, but it's sweet. It tastes like really bad cherry.
I don't know what kind of Christmas dinners they've had.
Bad ones.
This is a bad time to find out that I don't really like mince pies, isn't it?